How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Exponential Awareness. Relaunching some videos, and I'm going to go over events happening in the world. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll up at the top here. I've created three saved channels here. Let me go ahead and zoom in if it'll let me. Nope. So four channels here. So I have Western events, East Asia events, Middle East events, and miscellaneous. And you'll see there's a lot of crossover in these different groups that I've made here, just to keep track of the information. And sometimes you'll see stuff jumps from one group to the other. Sorry about that. Trying my best to keep all this information organized. So let's go ahead and start with Western events. There's a lot of news in here. Just going to go ahead and read through this and give some light commentary where I can. So starting at the top here, it says the U.S. has seized Venezuela President Nicolas Maduro's Air Force One plane in the Dominican Republic. The F-900 plane has been flown to Florida. This is an interesting development in the world for one country to seize a plane of another country. And, if you wanted to appear that you're not interfering with another country's elections, seizing that president's Air Force One plane is probably not a wise move. Russia will launch an offensive in that word, Dnipropetrovsk. Too many consonants next to each other and vowels. Ukraine in the spring of next year. This could be, I think, some misleading information. Why would Russia announce that information? And why would they put it out in the news if it was true? The lack of an intel to your enemy is key in warfare, unless you wanted to distract them and have them think you're going to attack there. Washington, Associated Press. The Justice Department has announced criminal charges on Tuesday against Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar and other militants linked to the October 7th attack in Israel. The federal complaint filed in New York City charges them with conspiracy to provide material support to a foreign terrorist organization, leading to deaths, which is very interesting development in the world. 5 Russian Tu-95 MS strategic bombers took off last night from Olyenya Air Base and are flying towards the Caspian Sea. There is a possibility of X-101 cruise missile launches in the coming hours, and as we saw from later news developments, that's exactly what happened. Let's see. Here in Naples, Italy, 2 U.S. Marines from the 24th Marine Expedition Unit embarked on USS Wasp were attacked in Izmir, Turkey, while on liberty during a regularly scheduled port visit at about 3:30 p.m. The 2 Marines were aided by other Marines in the area and were subsequently taken to a local hospital for evaluation as a precaution, but were not injured and have returned to the USS Wasp. Local Izmir police and Naval Crimea Investigation Services are cooperating in an investigation of the incident. No Marines have been detained by authorities, and those involved are cooperating with investigators. The 24th MEU is currently on a routine deployment with the WASP and Amphibious Readiness Group in the U.S. 6th Fleet Area of Operations, U.S. allied and partner interests in the region, including in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea, ready for intermission and posture to deter aggression. The WSP AR-24th MEU recently completed a bilateral training exercise with Turkey in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea. One of the notes here is the group that is alleged to have been attacking them is a communist group. Let's see. Here's an interesting piece here. It says Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump says if elected, he'll have no problem releasing Epstein's client list. And that's not 100% accurate based on this interview. He said he would be inclined to release it. There is no complete affirmation there. Let's see. Here's Zelensky via his official Telegram channel. Ukrainian President Zelensky confirmed that a Russian missile strike took place in Poltava, central Ukraine, and vowed revenge against Russia for such an attack. People were trapped under rubble. Many people were rescued, but more than 180 were injured. Unfortunately, there are many casualties as of now. We know that 41 people were killed. My deepest condolences to all of their relatives and loved ones. The Russian scum will surely pay for this strike. We continue to urge everyone in the world who has the power to stop this terror. Ukraine needs air defense systems and missiles now, not sitting in storage. Long-range strikes that can protect us from Russian terror are needed now, not later. Every day of delay, unfortunately, means more lost lives. Eternal memory to all those whose lives were taken by Russia. This is regarding the attack from last night. which is 9/3/2024, or it would have been the morning of 9/4/2024 in Ukraine time. Here we have some images. It says warning graphic content. I'm not going to show it. Hours ago, Russian and Ukrainian media reported that Russian Federation strategic forces conducted a massive missile strike in Poltava, central Ukraine, leaving dozens killed. According to the media, 2 Russian ballistic missiles have struck what is officially an educational facility and hospital in central Ukraine's Poltava city, killing at least 51 people and wounding more than 200 others, Ukrainian authorities say. Photos posted on social media showed several bodies of deceased young men, including military ones, on the ground, covered in dust and debris, with badly damaged side of a large building behind them. Ukrainian ground forces said Ukrainian military personnel had been killed. However, Ukrainian army did not specify how many the killed were from armed forces, but the attack seems to be a major blow to Kiev forces as it tries to bolster its ranks to hold off a more powerful enemy. According to reports on social media, the missile strikes targeted the 179th Training Center for Communications troops, which were stationed in Poltava, with the attack pulverizing the training, administrative, and dining sites of the unit. Now, notice up above it said educational facility. There's a bit of a message trying to be conveyed here to the world, and we see that it was a military training site, which makes it a target in the war. U.S. media and Reuters reports that Democrat New York Governor Kathy Hochul's former deputy chief of staff was arrested by the FBI for acting as an agent of the Chinese Communist Party. Linda Sun, former aide to New York Governor Kathy Hochul, and her husband, Chris Hu, were arrested Tuesday morning at their Long Island home. The FBI had searched the Manhasset home in July. Officials have not alleged Hochul or Sun's work in the governor's office is connected to the arrest in any way. Avil Small, Hochul's press secretary, said in a statement to ABC News, "This individual was hired by the executive chamber more than a decade ago. We terminated her employment in March 2023 after discovering evidence of misconduct, immediately reported her actions to law enforcement, and have assisted law enforcement throughout this process." Federal prosecutors from the Eastern District of New York and the FBI confirmed the arrests. Belgium. Romania appoints female nominees for European Commission in bid to please Ursula von der Leyen, as around 17 countries rejected her demand to appoint female appointees. Didier Reynders, Victoria Negrescu were initials favorites for Belgian and Romanian seats, but ended up losing them. Last night, September 2nd, this was from yesterday, a group of 32 armed Venezuelan criminals took over an apartment building in Chicago. On social media, netizens published the audio of the 911 dispatch call by locals calling for police help. The number of incidents involving Chilean, i.e. Venezuelan migrants with Chilean passport, and Venezuelan criminals has been growing exponentially. Funny word there. With raiders attacking homes, apartments, and taking control of buildings since last year, as the Mexican-American border crisis is notoriously being exploited by rogue actors. We're seeing more and more of those attacks. It's becoming exponential. On September 1st, on American social media, it was reported that masked members of Venezuelan gangs wielding AR-15 style rifles were seen raiding homes in Denver suburbs. No arrests have been made, as it is notorious Colorado has become absolutely lawless, and it's spreading across the United States as Mexican-American border crisis continues to escalate. As reported previously, such gangs are cells of Tren de Aragua, also known as TDA, criminal network, a Venezuelan gang that works closely with Venezuelan regime intelligence, with the gang spreading its influence in the U.S. by weaponizing the migration of Venezuelans fleeing from the economic collapse in their homeland due to Maduro's failed economic policies by placing their operatives among the waves crossing the border zone. Here we see a post from, I'm guessing, someone in the West that says the Mongolian government's failure to carry out the binding ICC arrest of warrant for Putin is a heavy blow to the International Criminal Court of the International Criminal Justice System. Mongolia allowed the indicted criminal to escape justice, thereby sharing responsibility for his war crimes. We will work with partners to ensure that this has consequences for Ulaanbaatar. So we see a bit of a narrative there. Mongolia did not participate in the West's side of the story. In Izmir, members of the Turkish Communist Party, TKP, were spotted marching with their flags and banners. I'm seeing links online that is trying to tie this group to the group that attacked the the Marines. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but I have seen those claims. United States Navy USS Wasp were deployed in the Turkish waters for a 5-day visit and a pre-scheduled military drills with the Turkish Navy, TCG, in Anadolu and TCG Gokaba. Now, remember that point of the U.S. Navy and Turkey working together when we go through some other points. The U.S. Navy amphibious assault ship before was and still is deployed to the Mediterranean Sea to deter potential threats against Israel before being docked at Turkey's port of Izmir. The TKP, not to be confused with TKP-ML, is a minor anti-Erdogan, AKP, MHP, Marxist-Leninist, and very often holds protests against the presence of U.S. and NATO troops in Turkish territory. Following popular pressure, Brazil's Supreme Court announces it will no longer impose fines for use of VPN to access X in general way, only for those who use it to spread hate speech. And so that draws the question of, are VPNs really as safe as we make them out to be, or people make them out to be? I have thought for quite some time that they're not, and that even to the extent that they might be honey traps to catch people, to filter that content through a VPN source, because the people likely to use a VPN are people who are quote-unquote awake to what's happening and likely sharing content that the government would not like. So it seems like a honey trap situation to me. Members of the Alternative for Deutschland party on Twitter X decided to celebrate in a short but very old-fashioned and straightforward way the victory at the Thuringian state elections. And for those just watching, the meme just says Sieg or Sieg. I don't know German, but I'm guessing that means something to the right there. Key notes about the Thuringian elections. In Thuringia, where the most radical senators of the party is based, the AfD has just won the first state election in the party's history. For the first time since 1933, a nationalist party is set to have been elected to control a German region. Interesting. This marks the first time since World War II that a German state east of Zanagräzi, whatever that is under control of German nationalists. If indeed AfD takes power in Thuringia, it will be, as expected so far, none other than Bjorn Höcke, the most right-wing figure in post-Cold War German mainstream politics, to be sworn in as local governor. And here's the results on the screen for those who are watching of the votes there. You see the AfD won substantially. In the U.S., migrants flooding New York City's justice system, making up 75% of arrests in Midtown, as quote-unquote pathetic sanctuary city laws handcuff cops. Across New York, recently arrived migrants are flooding the criminal justice system as far higher rates than public officials have acknowledged. Police sources shared with the Post a staggering estimate that as many as 75% of the people they've been arresting in Midtown Manhattan in recent months for crime like assault, robbery, and domestic violence are migrants. In parts of Queens, the figure is more than 60%, sources there estimate. On any given day, Big Apple criminal court dockets are packed with asylum seekers who have run afoul of the law. The problem is made worse by the sanctuary city laws that mean New York cops aren't allowed to work with ICE on cases in which they believe suspects are in the country illegally. Additionally, the New York Police Department says it is barred from tracking the immigration status of offenders. This makes almost impossible for the authorities to get their arms around the problem. Experts and sources on the ground say, making matters worse, police sources say word has gotten out in the shelters about the city's lax bail guidelines, meaning migrants know they are going to get kicked back onto the street quickly after they're nabbed. A City Hall spokesman pointed to Mayor Eric Adams' previous calls for the city council to change the sanctuary city laws. Last week, Adams said, right now, we don't have the authorization to be able to go and coordinate with ICE. We have to follow the law. And what's interesting about this is if you just put this in the context of someone that has kids, if your kids are misbehaving and you don't punish them, what behavior would you expect? Well, you'd expect the same behavior to continue because they've gotten away with it. That same thought process extends to every human, not just children, but it's most evident in children. There are deep problems with the outcome of World War II. Most disturbingly, the war ends with the Joseph Stalin and the Soviets in control of half of Europe and dominant in Asia. Yet the narrative is that World War II was fought to end tyranny. In the Atlantic Charter, FDR stated that one of the core aims of Allied intervention was to establish a peace which will afford to all nations the means of dwelling in safety within their own boundaries, and which will afford assurance that all men in all lands may live out their lives in freedom from fear or want. But that isn't what happened. Instead, World War II ended with a brutal dictator in control of vast swaths of new territory. World War II did not end aggression or tyranny. If anything, the conflict ended with even more human beings worldwide under totalitarian domination. Was World War II fought to free Poland? If so, it was a failure. Poland remained under Soviet control for more than 40 plus years. Was World War II fought to free China from aggression and genocide? If so, it was a failure. The communists immediately seized control and brutally murdered and starved tens of millions. I believe close to 60 million. I have been told that Germany invading Poland in September of 1939 was a terrible international crime, yet the USSR also invaded Poland in September 1939, seizing more territory than the Nazis. The communists also immediately killed nearly 10 times the number of Polish civilians during the period between 1939 and 1941, yet the Nuremberg Soviet judges sat in judgment over their former Nazi allies. How can we call this justice? We can call it justice if there's a motive that isn't being made known to the public. America isn't ready for another war because it doesn't have the troops. This is an opinion article, just as the last one was. Coverage of the wars in Ukraine and Gaza is mostly dominated by talk of weapons. Reporters and analysts focus on suicide drones, on shell deficits, on targeting algorithms. But for all the attention devoted to modern weapons and munitions, both conflicts are proving that modern war still comes down to people. In Ukraine, battlefield deaths on both sides were estimated to number more than 200,000 by the fall of 2023. The U.S. weapons and munitions have been critical for Kiev's war effort. It was territorial militias and hastily trained citizen soldiers who helped save Ukraine from total conquest in 2022. At the same time, it was a partial mobilization of more than 300,000 troops that stabilized Russia's lines and prevented potential collapse in late 2022. Today, the war has settled into an attritional slugfest, with both sides desperate to keep the flow of new recruits going, to the point where ranks have opened to older men, women, and convicts. The situation is much the same in the Middle East. On October 7th, Israel's heavily automated Gaza perimeter was breached by well-trained but low-tech Hamas terrorists. The attack was eventually repulsed by conscript soldiers and armed volunteers. Even the startup nation that prides itself in its technological prowess, security depends first and foremost on people. Similar to the Russian mobilization before the invasion of Ukraine, the immediate calling up of 360,000 reservists enabled Israel to conduct its campaign against Hamas and deter other non-state foes in the West Bank and Lebanon. America did away with the Draft 51 years ago, waging its many wars and interventions since with all-volunteer force, AVF. But all-volunteer is a misnomer. Americans aren't lining up to serve, and the AVF is really an all-recruited force. Its previous annual recruitment of about 150,000 mostly young Americans who are individually located, pitched, and incentivized to serve comes at considerable effort and expense. The United States got through 2 foreign wars in Iraq and Afghanistan with the all-volunteer force, though neither war was a victory. A war with Russia, China, Iran, or North Korea would be an entirely different proposition, with the possibility of more casualties in a few weeks than the United States suffered in the entire global war on terrorism. But as crises overseas multiply, the immediate existential threat to the all-volunteer force, and ultimately the U.S. security, is at home. There aren't enough Americans willing and able to fill the military ranks. This is a very good point. Military troops are imperative for success of war. However, once you get into a large-scale war with peer-to-peer adversaries, you can also use larger yielding munitions, which you can't use in Iraq and Afghanistan in many cases because it was person-to-person, so you needed heavy amounts of personnel to wage that war. in a large-scale war of that stance, I would propose that we would see targeting of economic means of output as well, and not solely just on war fronts, which would change the dynamic entirely. Apparently, the manifesto for the Tennessee Transformer was released, and that's been making its rounds on social media. So if you want to go check that out, it is available online. I'm not sure how heavily redacted or manipulated, since it was in the hands and not released to the public for quite some time. Here's a video. Members of Communist Party of Turkey throw eggs against United States sailors walking on the streets of Izmir, Western Turkey. So as you can see in the video, you have quite the crowd growing. Let's see if we actually see any eggs being thrown. I haven't read a lot of this content or watched a lot of it. I simply compile it into these different folders and then read through it for the day to update world events. Members of the Communist Party of Turkey announced that they will keep watch at the port until the U.S. warship responsible for protecting Israel leaves Izmir. Quote unquote, "We make a promise to our brothers who died in Palestine. We will not leave this place until the bloody ship leaves." Interesting statement there by the Communist Party in Turkey. Several press pool vans, this is back in the U.S., several press pool vans in Governor Tim Walz's motorcade were involved in an accident crash on the highway. One staffer is treated for a broken arm. Governor Tim Walz's car and that of Representative Moore's continued their journey. Here is a data set of Indian immigrants into Ireland. Almost 2,000 Indians have been arriving in Ireland a month since January 2023. In October 2023, over 1,000 a week arrived. Source: PPSN registrations by year, month, and country. So that data set is on the screen if you want to go ahead and pause and look at that. Keith Woods. This is about Ireland as well. Keith Woods. Ireland is experiencing its worst housing crisis ever. 41% of people aged 18 to 34 now live with their parents. About 70,000 Irish people, most of them young, emigrated last year. Immigration is also a record high, including importing another 2,000 Indians monthly. If any of you know about tenement housing in the early 1900s, I have thought often about that being recreated there. In Germany, this is quite an important data point because Germany is an economic powerhouse for the European Union and Europe as a whole. So this is a canary in the coal mine, if you so to speak. Germany's Volkswagen is considering unprecedented factory closures in Germany. The company may try to end its 3-decade-old pact with workers that guarantees job securities. These would be the first closure in Germany during VW's 87-year history. Germany's competitiveness as a business location is declining. VW is struggling with their high logistics, energy, and labor costs. VW employs about 650,000 workers globally, with nearly 300,000 in Germany. The last time VW closed a major car factory was over 30 years ago in the U.S. The Pentagon Times says the U.S. Constitution might be a threat. The Constitution is also sacred. Is it also dangerous? Something you can look up online if you want to read more about that and what the Pentagon Times has to say about our Constitution. Mexico's President AMLO leaves office with a greater than or less than 70% approval at his farewell address. People want an authentic democracy, not a simulation. Not an oligarchy with a facade of democracy. The oligarchs want power without the people. To hell with that, he says. And if I recall, I believe AMLO has communist leadings, but that's not to say he's not a captured asset. The U.S. is demanding the transmission of biometric data from EU citizens. Instead of protecting them and rejecting this audacious demand, the EU Commission is starting negotiations that will likely result in selling out of its citizens once again, says Christine Anderson. So you can go ahead and look that up as well if you want. There's going to be a series of pieces I compiled here that shows there is a concerted effort across multiple governments to collect biometric data right now, probably including voice recordings of stuff like this online. Foreigners entering the Russian Federation for a period of more than 90 days will be obliged to submit, I think that means obligated, to submit their biometric data upon entry into Russia. That will be part of efforts of the Russian state to strengthen national security. So there we go, even Russia, same thing. Sometimes they pull back. This is an article that says Indonesia requires international visitors to submit electronic health declaration before arrival. More biometric data, more data about you. Sometimes they pull back to let things cool off, but they never stop coming for more of our freedoms, liberties, and dignity. So there we go. Here's a video. I'm not going to play this, but it's viral. It's on the internet. You can find it. There's his username down there if you want to find it. Darula apparently is his username. He's warning Venezuelans that Chicago is not Colorado and that there will be a different response than the people in Colorado. Funny video here. If you want to look it up, there's a viral video right now of a guy in England that describes a situation that sounds exactly what's happening, but he's describing it in kind of a comedic way, to call attention to the fact that just thinking about all the stuff happening in England and around the world, it almost seems completely unreal to imagine that happening, but the scenario he describes is very closely based on real events that have happened in England. Here we see Putin and Xi Jinping together. The only reason I put this in the Western events category is because this has an impact to the West, but it's really an East Asia event / Asia event with Russia. Putin signs long-term cooperation agreement with Mongolia, following similar agreements with North Korea and Vietnam in June, restoring Soviet-era alliances. The agreement includes investment in power plants, aviation fuel, weapon supplies, and troop training. The trade almost entirely excludes use of the dollar and the euro. Russian pipelines will go through Mongolia and Vladivostok to China, and then to Vietnam and North Korea. Putin also invited the head of Mongolia, whatever that name is, to Russia for the BRICS summit in Kazan next month and the 80th Victory Day celebration in May 2025. Chinese Vice President Han Zhang will visit Russia and Mongolia between September 4 to 8 and take part in the Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok, Russia. So we see more alliances forming between Russia and other parties. Is college still worth it? Many Americans say no. This person's comment says, if I were a late teen today, I would become an electrician, plumber, carpenter, or something like that to avoid college. And that's very true. Those fields are paying quite well right now, but that's not to say it will continue. Those are the first people laid off as a sign of economic crisis. And and all the leading economic indicators indicate that we are about to go into a pretty severe recession, if not already in one, and a depression. But that's only probabilities, nothing is certain. Britain's nuclear weapons are now forever reliant on U.S. military scientists after a transatlantic treaty was quietly signed. So Britain and the U.S. partnering up, and the U.K. becoming dependent on the U.S. military for their nuclear weapons. Article you can go look up if you want to. From Bloomberg, VW turns on Germany as China targets Europe's EV blunders. A lot of imports of Chinese EVs right now, and that is putting significant pressure on car manufacturers, vehicle manufacturers, even though those electric vehicles are having significant problems and very serious harm to people. Nonetheless, they are cheap, and right now people need cost-effective solutions. Here on CNN, Captured News Network, Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank calls out the insanity of the Democrats. He explains that the leftist policies are destroying blue states and says they have become uninvestable. And I don't think he's wrong there at all. I just question the source here, CNN. We know their past, the history with them. I thought this was an interesting take on life in America. This is one person's capture of it. And it's a picture of donuts, and it's a matcha donut that's gluten-free, dairy-free, and nut-free. Here's a purported conversation of a person with a counter. Is this $4.99 for 3 donuts? No, it's for 1. Why are they so expensive? I don't know. Maybe because they're gluten-free. Oh, so what are they made of? I don't know. They look pretty small. What's the diameter? Probably around 3 inches. So it's about 7.5 centimeters. I have no idea. But they are made locally. So transportation costs is very low, right? I don't know. Are they tasty? I don't know. Does anyone know? I don't know. Okay. Have a nice day. And that is exactly what I see here in America, is just people don't know stuff. They just have to memorize talking points, and they have no information to back it. Not only that, but it demonstrates the inflation here in the United States. This says the missile strike on the training center in Poltava killed not only a large number of Ukrainian servicemen, but also several Swedish instructors. This was revealed in a Facebook post by Britta L. Wanger, a foreign volunteer supporting the Ukrainian army who studied at the Swedish university with one of the instructors killed in Poltava. Given Sweden's plans to supply 2 ASC-890 aircraft to Ukraine and the destroyed training center's profile, the Swedish instructors may have been involved in training Ukrainian pilots to fly the ASC-890, which is this is the kind of open source intelligence that I'm really looking at finding. Is this is someone observing a Facebook post of someone has a close relationship with an individual that was at this facility. That's not stuff that's easily readily available, and that's what I'm trying to bring to this channel, other than just the more well-known information. Here we see a picture of sprouted walnuts for $13.99 here in the U.S., and it just demonstrates the inflation we have going on and the silly marketing that people buy into. You just soak some walnuts in water for a little bit, and they're quote-unquote sprouted, and you charge $14 for it for a very small portion. Let's see, what is this one about? It's something in Canada. Some new parents in Canada that were surprised by the Canadian healthcare system's response. Here's a quote from them. It says, "And they told me I was not a mother, but that I was a birth person. And my husband was not my husband, but my partner." A Russian couple returned from Canada to their homeland to start a new life and raise their children away from destructive ideals. I don't have any confirmation on this, so you can go ahead and look that up if you want. Could be fake news for all I know, but interesting data point. Is Germany planning the mass persecution of right-wing opposition and massacre of conservative dissidents? The Foundation to Battle Injustice have obtained exclusive facts revealing German ruling coalition plan to eliminate the opposition and clear the political field. Massive repression and persecution will affect members and supporters of the far-right German party, the Alternative for Germany, who are planned to be eliminated both informationally and physically. The German government intends to get rid of several popular political figures whom members of the German leadership consider odious, enemies of Chancellor Scholz and Foreign Minister Baerbock, by the end of summer 2025. The FRG plans to ban many right-wing opposition figures from participating in public and political life by restricting their freedom or through media smear campaigns, which is interesting because the more they do this, the more they're going to prove the opposition's point. There was a photo circulating of Commander Yaste of the USS John S. McCain firing a rifle from the deck, and it was observed that the scope is mounted backwards. Not only that, but look at that chicken wing. Like, if that's one of the first things I look at to see if someone knows what they're doing with a rifle. Do they chicken wing or not? If they chicken wing, they've never studied, or they've never had any serious instruction. Over here we see he's been relieved of his command due to lack of confidence, and Captain Christie has been Allison Christie is his replacement, which is very interesting. A very, very manly-looking woman here. Elon Musk defies X-Ban in Brazil by beaming app from space. Space-based internet network Starlink has more than 250,000 customers in Brazil. And this brings up a topic I've been thinking about for quite some time, is SpaceX launching satellites into orbit. Not only do they have military contracts to provide the same for the U.S. government via satellites, but for their individual satellites, they have the ability to completely bypass the wired internet system on Earth. And so it takes away a bit of the control from entities that seek to ban people and censor them. Excuse me. Disguised witnesses to testify against neo-Nazi accused of planning MD power grid attack. I'm guessing MD means Maryland. Not sure. 3 disguised witnesses will testify for the federal government against Brandon Clint Russell, the quote-unquote neo-Nazi who allegedly conspired to attack electrical substations in the Baltimore area, so Maryland. A judge ruled August 28th. This is interesting, having disguised witnesses give a testimony. Isn't there something in the Constitution about having the right to face your accuser or something that I'll have to look that up. Air raid sirens sounding nationwide in Ukraine. We went over that a little bit earlier. Yeah, so lots of attacks in Ukraine happened overnight. Supersonic cruise missiles being deployed. Additional Tu-22M3 strategic bombers airborne. And yeah, we've got a lot of reports here of that activity. A lot of videos circulating about the damage, and there's several fires burning now from the attacks. Ukrainian media citing sources in Zelensky's team. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba will be dismissed. There's been a number of resignations and dismissals from Ukrainian key positions, governmental positions, over the last 48 hours. Interesting video of Trump talking about Hannibal Lecter. You can probably look it up if you want. He brings up Hannibal Lecter a number of times, which is strange. Strange character to be bringing up. Supposedly, this is a snippet from a newspaper, a quote of Trump from 1998. If I were to run, I'd run as a Republican. They're the dumbest group of voters in the country. They believe anything on Fox News. I could lie, and they'd still eat it up. I bet my numbers would be terrific. I don't know if that's true or not. Anybody could have printed this, but interesting data point, considering the behavior I often see from the Republican side. The liberal side is just as dumb, but I'm very surprised by the Republican side just willingly going along with a lot of the crap that's said, rather than asking how this is going to happen or to what end these statements are being made. I'm noticing across the board, both parties, or I should say all three parties, left, center, and right, there's a lack of critical thinking right now, which someone pointed out with a meme of a donut a few moments ago. A new law granting Australians the right to disconnect went into effect on Monday. This means many Australians can now ignore emails, messages, or calls after normal working hours. Their employer could be fined if they violate this rule. I would expect this to actually propagate across the West as we see more of this encroachment on outside of normal working hours. Something I have strictly tried to avoid whenever I'm in leadership roles is encroaching on people's personal time. And here's a video of Kamala Harris using a fake black accent. Very viral video right now. The handle is Chad is right, and it compiles her use of a fake black accent along with scenes from the movie Tropic Thunder, which is a very funny compilation. Can't play it. Probably gonna get a strike for that. Breaking, the deadliest single attack in Ukraine in 2024 happened in the Poltava, Ukraine yesterday. Yeah, so we went over that. This is someone's graphic of how they think the election will turn out. It shows Republicans winning with 275 votes and Democrats losing with 263 votes, and 270 votes needed to win, so Republicans winning by 5 votes. I don't buy into these polls very often. Strange stuff happens in the middle of the night, pipes burst and stuff like that, and news agencies report winners well ahead of results being totaled, so never know. Nvidia's stock price has fallen sharply, wiping out $280 billion in market capitalization, the largest one-day loss of any company. Nvidia's stock is so far overvalued for its profit and earnings. It's just ridiculous how overvalued it is. So something you can look into if you want. Quite a lengthy statement there. Not going to read it. This says, though, adding insult to injury to margin calls, Nvidia receives a DOJ subpoena. Which it's interesting. Can't get into too much detail right now, but I do an analysis on the stock market that demonstrates you can time when this stuff's going to happen. And I called this 6 months ago. Said, hey, this is the last leg up for Nvidia, and then it's going to drop. And every time it's the stock market's going to drop, or a specific stock is going to drop, or something like that, there's a sudden news event that comes out. So the question then arises, if you can project these based on algorithmic calculations, is the news or is the event being held off until the right quote unquote time? I don't know, but you can see it over and over again in the stock market throughout thousands of stocks and through various indexes. The same thing again and again using Elliott wave theory and Fibonacci's algorithm. Let's see. This is a Finnish economics professor, Tuomas Malinen, on X. This is his post. Quote, I reiterate, all my military contacts tell me that our military is preparing for a war. And I can confirm that as well. From a defense perspective, this makes no sense because it has been reported that Russian bases near the Finnish border have been almost emptied to Ukraine. Something is up. But what he's not looking at is it's not just about Ukraine. You can actually draw a physical map in the world that shows where the East and the West are at war. And it's very specific lines. And you can draw that line from Finland all the way down to the Mediterranean Sea. You can encapsulate Israel in that. And then off to the east, you can draw it from Japan all the way down to Taiwan and down into the Philippines. And that is the barrier in which there is tension happening from east to west. He's responding to a previous tweet that says, I've received credible reports from Finnish sources indicating that if the NATO-Ukraine escalation comes, it will involve northern Finland in some way. Preparations, at least, seem to have been underway. So interesting. Euronews. Finland looks to stop Russians buying property within its borders. The Finnish government has recently put forward a proposal which will allow it to prevent most Russian citizens from buying property in Finland. The move, suggested the defense minister Antti Hakanen, it is also being seen as an attempt by the country to bolster national security. The ban in question has the potential to be used against any funds of citizens from countries that may pose a threat to Finland's national security, as well as those which the EU believes to have violated their country's territorial sovereignty. If the ban goes through, it would mean that Russians, who are also permanent residents anywhere in the European Union, not just Finland, as well as dual citizens who hold Russian citizenship, would not be able to buy property. So we see a retracting, a lot of countries retracting and turning towards nationalism, even if their governments aren't overtly "quote unquote" nationalists. We see this. You see the actions coming out of people of nationalism. Biden administration is set to hit Russian Federation, its state media, as well as Russian propaganda and disinformation with sanctions and with whole-of-government action for trying to manipulate U.S. opinion ahead of the 2024 presidential election. So we see the same thing coming out again as 2020 and 2016 with the accusation that external governments are trying to influence elections, which I'm sure that is happening just as the United States does the same. The Biden-Harris administration, without proofs, imply indirectly that Russian government and its media branches are trying to support the Republican candidate Donald Trump. The main target of the action will be Russia Today RT outlet and its branches in the U.S. We did have a shooting apparently in Barrow County, Georgia, at I think it's Appalachia High School. So early in the school year, we already see this happening, and it came from a freshman. Initial reports were that there were 2 dead and 4 injured in the shooting at Appalachia High School, according to preliminary reports. We'll see more updates on that later. U.S. service member detained in Venezuela, officials say. The service member, a U.S. Navy sailor, is a U.S. citizen and was detained on August 30th in Caracas, according to the officials. One of the officials said he is being held by Venezuelan intelligence agency SEBIN, S-E-B-I-N. A defense official told CNN, "We are aware of the reports that a U.S. Navy sailor was detained on August 30th by Venezuelan law enforcement authorities while on personal travel to Venezuela. The U.S. Navy is looking into this and working closely with the State Department. We refer you to the State Department for additional questions." It's interesting, the military doesn't just flippantly allow you to go anywhere on leave. You actually have to submit a leave package that says where you're going, and it has to be approved by command if it's outside of a certain radius or not your home location. And so this would have had to been reviewed by a command at some point for him to be able to return back to Venezuela. And especially with the stuff happening in Venezuela right now, that's very precarious that he was allowed to go. I'm guessing he's Venezuelan and was visiting family, and that's why he was authorized. But having spoken to an asylum seeker lately, he left Venezuela 11 months ago. He's an engineer, and he found a job here. And he said, and I quote, "If I return, as soon as I land in the airport, I will be handcuffed." And he's done nothing of that, but just the fact that he's visited the U.S. and was away for so long will trigger something in the Venezuela government to arrest him upon arrival. That was a quote from him. A refugee from Afghanistan is facing charges after allegedly taking part in the gang rape of a woman in York, England. Fahim Khan, 18, had reportedly been praised as an integration success story by local media. So we see more and more of the same stuff happening in England, and the government there not doing anything about it, and in fact seems to be supporting it. New Biden administration to target Russian propaganda and the disinformation with the whole of government. We went over that. I think there's a bit more on that later, but I can't remember. Brazilian Senator Marcos Doval, Podemos-ES, whatever that means, accused Supreme Court Justice Alexander de Moraes of abuse of authority for imposing the largest fine ever recorded in Brazilian history for a senator in cases not involving corruption, 50 million reais, or $8.8 million. The offense? Criticizing the actions of the minister. So we see the same thing. Anybody criticizing or speaking out publicly is having serious consequences. And we see this spreading across many countries of the world right now. On September 3rd, a major wave of resignations and removals has taken place in Ukrainian leadership, including generals, executive, and legislative sectors. The Ukrainian media reported that such a thing is part of a major reshuffle of Ukrainian administrative sphere. In total, among the resignations are Ukraine's Minister for Reintegration of Temporarily Occupied Territories and Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine, Irina Vereshchuk, Minister of Strategy Industry, Alexander Kamyshin, Minister of Justice, Denys Malyuska, Minister of Ecology, Rosalind Stritlitz, Head of State Property Fund, Vitaly Koval, Deputy Head of President Zelensky's Office, Radoslava Sherma, removed from office, Chief of Staff of the Unmanned Systems Forces Command, Roman Gladsky. And here's a handwritten resignation letter from Speaker of the Verkhovna Rada, Rada Verkhovna Rada Stefanchek, whatever that is. So this is the Ukrainian Minister of Foreign Affairs Dmitry Kuleba handwritten resignation. And that could be real, that could be fake. That could be a forced pushing out of someone. Migrants flooding New York City's justice system. We went over that. A deputy of Uzbekistan proposed banning symbols of propaganda of Soviet ideology. So there's another line of tension between East and West, Russia and non-Russia. Here's a post that says, Iranians for Trump to mobilize community for 2024 U.S. elections. Apparently there is a Iranians for Trump faction. I didn't know about that. At least 4 casualties, 3 of which fatal, are being reported from the shooting. 1 person has been arrested, according to the Bowers County Sheriff's Office, and that's in Georgia. Apparently there was another stabbing in Germany. Man injured 2 people with a knife in Bonn. Police shot the suspect, who later died in hospital, BILD reports. Back in the U.S., U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland announces that the Department of Justice has filed criminal indictments against 6 senior Hamas officials. We went over that a little bit earlier. Next post, when the Russian armed forces moved into Syria, ISIS was on the outskirts of Damascus, and Western countries led by the U.S. were attempting to assert their dominance in eastern Syria. The U.S. was exploiting Syria's rich oil, gas, and grain resources instead of fighting terrorism. We stabilized the situation in Syria, says Sergei Lavrov, Russian foreign minister. So there's another line in the sand between East and West in Syria. NATO is an offensive alliance that brings aggression and danger, says the Kremlin. Salom Zurabilishvili, whatever that name is not the president of Georgia after she violated the Constitution, says Arakali Kobakhidze, Georgian prime minister. So you see the Georgian prime minister saying that the president of Georgia is not the president. Simon Harris, prime minister of Ireland, has arrived in Kiev, Ukraine. So while Ireland is imploding, you see its prime minister heading abroad. Armenia is to attend the BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia, which is to be held in October, Armenia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs says. And as you know, Armenia and Azerbaijan are undergoing quite the civil war and almost, I'd say, a genocide at this point. So very interesting to see Armenia aligning with BRICS and Russia. Police arrest activist Greta Thunberg in Copenhagen. And Copenhagen, Denmark, during pro-Palestinian protest. And whenever this character comes back in the news, that then generally means you're going to see leftist folks in the streets doing stuff. It's just the pattern I've noticed. And this is generally used as some sort of emotional builder to get them active, that person. NATO has not abandoned the idea of shooting down Russian missiles over Ukraine, says Gitanas Nausėda, Lithuanian president. CNN is reporting 30 injuries and 40 deaths at the school. That number was later, I think, drawn back to 9 people. There's a photo of Miss Thunberg being arrested. If the French state won't help protect Catholic churches from being banned, then I think Catholics have a right to defend their heritage and to protect their churches. It's a God-given right. It can be done peacefully and in accordance with France's laws. That's an opinion piece. In Europe, such behavior wouldn't be tolerated if it targeted a football club, so I don't see why Catholics should remain the same. Election officials in Germany, claimed a software error in the state of Saxony allocated too many seats to the AfD, the movement on the right that they don't like, and removed 1 seat from the party in Landtag, which removed their vote-blocking minority. Imagine that. From Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, it is clear that the essence of the West policy toward our country has always been that we are too strong, too independent, and something needs to be done about it, preferably to dismantle us. A very telling history is repeating itself, as today 50 countries are gathered against Russia, once again under Nazi banners, considering the nature of Vladimir Zelensky's regime. And it's not just the nature, but also the patches and banners worn by the fighters of the so-called Ukrainian army. Quote by Sergei Lavrov. NATO delegate Okay, that's a different language. NATO approves Ukraine's first incursion into the Russian territory. So you see NATO support for the Kursk invasion. Stoltenberg stated that Ukrainian forces' incursion into the Kursk region was an act of self-defense. And for the first time, NATO has expressed approval of the Ukrainian armed forces' advance into the Kursk region, which is part of Russia. Alliance Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg also denied claims that NATO was aware of Kiev's plans, stating that the military bloc played no role in the incident. E-Safety Commissioner demands all social media companies to provide info on how many kids use their platforms before launching age verification tech. Australia's E-Safety Commissioner Julia Inman Grant has put social media sites on notice, giving them 30 days to hand over data on how many children are using their platforms. This comes as the Federal Communication Minister Michelle Rowland completes her trial of digital IDs, voice scans, which I mentioned earlier, and facial recognition software to form part of the government's age verification technology to stop children accessing harmful content online. Basically, we've conditioned the children and educated them. Don't disrupt that, please, is what they're saying. China launches anti-dumping probe into Canadian canola imports in retaliation for EV tariffs. There have been a number of tariffs put on China's EV exports as it's been destroying car industries, and so China is launching a probe into canola oil from Canada. So we see economic warfare. Maduro government issues a statement in response to the confiscation of a plane and confirms that it is the one that has been used by the president of the republic. He describes the incident as piracy and reserves the right to take any legal action to repair this damage to the nation. U.S. requests trade dispute consultations with Canada over new digital services tax. The U.S. has requested trade dispute settlement consultations with Canada over its new digital services tax, the Biden administration said on Friday, adding that the discriminatory tax appears inconsistent with Canada's North American trade deal obligations. The U.S. Trade Representative Office said in a statement that it will work with Canada to resolve U.S. concerns over the new tax enacted in June through consultations, but if an agreement cannot be reached after 75 days, it may request a dispute settlement panel under the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement on Trade, USMCA. The request for consultations is the first step in the USMCA's dispute resolution process, which ultimately could lead to the imposition of retaliatory U.S. tariffs on imports from Canada. Canada getting themselves in some economic trouble, as it's already having severe issues in its economy. Mexico offers escorted rides north from southern Mexico for migrants with U.S. asylum appointments. Mexico will offer escorted bus rides from southern Mexico to the U.S. border for non-Mexican migrants who have received a United States asylum appointment, the government announced Saturday. The National Immigration Institute said that the buses will leave from southern cities of Villahermosa and Tapachula. The announcement came a week after the U.S. government expanded access to the CB1 application to southern Mexico. Access to the app, which allows asylum seekers to register and await an appointment, had previously been restricted to central and northern Mexico. We see container carriers seeing a profit again as we have logistical issues. Here's a chart of U.S. total bankruptcies. We see an increasing trend of bankruptcies for private companies, reaching a record high rate in the last 7 years. This was released, a number of documents that are supposedly demonstrating a Russian campaign online to provide disinformation. There's a number of documents that have come out. It's circulating on the internet, so if you want to go look that up, there you go. 2 RT employees indicted for covertly funding and directing U.S. companies that published thousands of videos in furtherance of Russian interests. So you see a continuance of this into this post. Jewish billionaire Mark Cuban, and it says in parentheses Chabanisky, I don't know if that's his given name, barks orders at Elon Musk to delete his account after Elon tweeted Tucker Carlson's latest episode on World War II. And it appears that Musk has obliged. and not deleting his account, but deleting the post. This is it says hashtag neo-feudalism. Over the past 4 years, the cost of food has surged by 37%, and the trend of increased imports of agricultural products continues this year, HRT reports. What is the future of food in Croatia? Prices are up 37% in 4 years, which is what the entire world is seeing, or much worse. Police confirmed that 4 were killed and 9 were injured in the Appalachian High School in Barrow County. SpaceX, led by Elon Musk, withdraws employees from Brazil and discourages travel to the country following increased abuse of authority by the Supreme Federal Court, ministers, and the Brazilian government. In an email sent last week, SpaceX President Gwen Shotwell advised employees not to travel to Brazil for work or leisure, according to the people familiar with the message. Additionally, the space technology company relocated its small group of non-Brazilian employees who were in the country, according to one of these people. And also in Brazil, this is a post that says 24 out of 81 senators in Brazil have publicly stated that they are supporting the impeachment of Supreme Federal Court Justice Alexander de Moraes, which is the one that imposed the X ban, I believe, known for ordering the blocking of social media X in the country, the arrest of political opponents, and the censorship of headlines and interviews. You have to wonder what his motives are for doing that. Who's behind the scenes with money or with leverage? The suspect from the shooting has been identified as 14-year-old freshman. No name has been given, but the name is given in the next post. His name is Colt Gray. And the last bit of news here for the Pacific West, although there are other items in the other categories that have stuff from the West, it says Belarus has detained an alleged Japanese spy who was operating in the country. The individual was allegedly involved in gathering intelligence on social and economic conditions of Belarus, the implementation of China's One Belt, One Road initiative, and the situation along the Belarusian-Ukrainian border. The report said he was filming military infrastructure, which is interesting that you would use Japanese personnel to complete that mission because you're going to stand out like a sore thumb in that country. You think at a very minimum you would use someone with Slavic heritage and background to blend in, and specifically someone that speaks the language fluently and has that appearance to mitigate suspicions. But nonetheless, we see Belarus is claiming they were Japanese. And that is all for this category. The other categories will be posted in separate videos, so if I made mention of something, that is where you will find that proceeding information. Until then, and until next time, take care.